it's like, well, I won't be good enough unless I get the implant. But then after the implants come in, we're like, well, I'm not going to be good enough unless I get the acting coach. And then I'm like, I'm not going to be good enough if I don't change my hair color. And then they always want something different. And so I think it's identifying that you're beautiful and perfect exactly where you are. And the universe is providing you everything you need from that place.
Hello, and welcome back to the Get Loved Up podcast. I'm your host, Koya Webb, and I am here with Sara Stewart, holistic health practitioner, and we met at a mastermind, and it's just been really awesome to get to know her. We met at a mastermind, and then we had a dinner together, and it's just amazing how when you really get to know someone, and I feel spiritual energy, so we have this spiritual connection, but I haven't had an opportunity to dive deep with her. So I'm diving deep with her for the first time with you. So welcome, Sara.
Yay, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and again, so grateful for you and all that you're doing as well.
Thank you. I'm so excited. First of all, when I found out you're also going to be a Hay House author.
Yes, we're in the same family. Yes. It was amazing.
Yes. Tell me a little bit about that. I guess maybe we want to start at the beginning though, up into being an author. But I spoke with you briefly, and you were saying you have been holistic your entire life. Like you started out like this.
Yeah. So I grew up in a really holistic environment, and my parents were meditating when we were kids. We actually, instead of getting grounded, we had to write out positive affirmations and go and meditate. And it was just a really different environment than most kids were raised in. My dad was a public speaker talking about the mind-body connection and psychology. And so this was the world I grew up in. And even so much that when my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer, he made a choice not to use Western medicine. And he decided to go home and meditate and connect to his own intuition. And then he chose to use food. And within 7 months, the cancer was completely gone. So I was growing up like listening to Deepak Chopra on audio cassettes. I was listening to Louise Hay. I was reading Hay House books. So this was the world that I was in. However, at 15, I was scouted to model. And I thought going into the industry that I had this really good head on my shoulders. I grew up in this different environment. And then I realized that not everyone else had this upbringing, and it was just such a different world. And within just a few days of beginning to model, I started to develop eating disorders that lasted for 10 years. So it was this really interesting dynamic where on one hand, I had such a beautiful relationship with food, and on the other hand, years later, it was killing me. And so it was this tennis match happening in my head. And what I realized was if I allowed this to happen to me, I can only imagine what other women are going through with media and social conditioning and programming and all of these other things, because I grew up in this space. And so I really wanted to figure out what had happened during those 10 years and how do I unlearn this process, right? How do I unlearn these programs and these beliefs that I had basically been taught for 10 years while I was in the industry. Right. And so I went back to meditation and mindfulness after I dove into nutrition, which actually made the anxiety worse. I was like, there's a spiritual component, there's a mind-body connection component, there's something else here other than just learning about food. Right. And at that point, I made a choice, and I said goodbye to the modeling industry, goodbye to the fashion industry, goodbye to this way of life. And I basically shut down my social media, left, and found myself again. And it took many years, and a lot of ups and downs and a lot of, points of hitting rock bottom. But through that process now, that's what I teach and coach on and support other women in.
Wow, that's a lot, and a lot I can relate to as well. So do you remember the first time, when the eating disorder started? What eating disorder was it, and do you remember why it started?
Yeah, so I remember going into the agency that I had signed with, and there was a woman there that said, now that you're part of this fashion industry, you have to stop working out. And you have to stop playing sports. And sports was my life. I had been playing sports my whole life. I loved basketball, I loved soccer. I was more muscular as a kid. And so for me, that was the moment that I was like, wait, this is who I am, but you want me to be something different. Right. And it was this weird moment of just I can't be who I am anymore. And then I ended up having to go take a class and learn makeup and how to wear heels and how to stand and all of these things that I had never been taught, right? And so it was like, you're actually morphing me into someone I'm not. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I guess I have to lose weight. This is the only way. And I don't really know like what it was inside of me. I try to think back to that time, like what was the desire in me to have this experience? But, you know, I think I was just like most girls who, you know, that from a small town thinking like this is a big opportunity and I get to go travel the world and see things I never got to see, and I'm in a big city and I want to experience a different life. And then once I was in, it was like that was my way of living, that was my income. And part of me was like, I get these great experiences, and then part of me was like, this is also, you know, damaging my health and my well-being and just my peace of mind. And so, but it's interesting that it took 10 years for me to like really wake up.
Right. And did they tell you, the agency mentioned, say you can't eat, or were you not eating because of what you felt you needed to look like?
Yeah, so a lot of the agents throughout 10 years basically told me not to eat. Like when I moved from Miami to New York, they said like, oh, you're gonna live on like water and spinach for the next couple months. And it was never like direct, like this is your meal plan, but they're always hints at it. Right. And so it was, you know, it was definitely like, you know, don't eat till your next casting. And it was kind of like in a joking manner, but those things are still being imprinted on you, right? Right. And so I think because I had, you know, the agents telling me that, and I wasn't naturally, then at the time I was going through puberty, I was like, this is the only way. This is the way that I get to have this experience. And so I didn't have enough courage, and I don't think my parents wanted to rip my dreams away from me. I think they were always wanting me to have an experience that, you know, if I wanted to have something and have this experience, they were always very positive and open to allowing me to experience whatever life I wanted, which was really great. But on the other hand, it also, you know, caused quite a bit of pain as well.
So did they notice you not eating? Because how old were you?
Yeah, I started when I was 14, signing around 15, and then my parents started to get concerned, but by the time it got really serious, I had moved to Miami and moved to New York, and they were kind of out of the picture. And the sad part, which what I realized, like in the hospital bed being told by a doctor, like you have to make a change, I realized in that moment, like the community, the people around me, I didn't have anyone. Like it was that moment where I was like, this is the life I've built for myself. Like what am I doing? Like, is this really, you know, like laying on my deathbed, like looking around, like I have no one here. And I didn't feel like I could call home because I was so shameful and I had so much guilt around what I had done. And so it was like I was living this life, and my father always would say, you know, the only thing you have is integrity. And I felt like I was living so much out of that. I was living so much out of my truth and who I was as a person. And so it was like that moment of like, I really need to make a change. This is not where I want to be.
Do you remember what put you in the hospital?
Yeah, so I'd been hospitalized several times, but it was dehydration, and I had adrenal fatigue, close to kidney failure, a lot of things where my body was just like shutting down from anorexia, bulimia, laxative abuse, like you name it, I was doing it.
So it was like kind of all of those combined at the same time.
And I would go and like gain weight, lose weight. And I know this can be really triggering for anyone, so just like holding space for that. But yeah, for a long time, it was just like gaining, losing, and there were parts of my life where I was like, oh, I need to gain weight because I'm scared of losing my life, and then I would just go back and forth. I need to make money, and it's just this really unhealthy lifestyle and way to live. And I honestly, like, I haven't spoken to any model or anyone in the industry ever who said that they haven't felt that pressure, you know, whether they're doing it or not. And I think it's a really important conversation to have.
Absolutely.
That we're really like, this is what we're putting these girls under, and like, these are the women that we're looking at on advertisements, and it's impacting everyone. So it took me a long time to really share my story and have the courage to share that the eating disorders were part of my history. For a long time, once I went back to nutrition and started really learning about nutrition again, and then opening up my practice, I started educating people about food and movement and my dad's journey. And that was kind of what I was sharing with people, and running retreats and leading retreats, but I wasn't sharing my own story. So I was still kind of like hiding behind my own story.
Right.
And then I finally like had the courage to share with a few people, and then the results were amazing, and people were so grateful that it kind of gave me the courage to continue to share more and more.
And what do you feel like basically in that time where you were like going through these experiences, what advice would you give? Like you said, there are people listening that might be triggering, they might be experiencing the same thing. So what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so for me, I was very, very fortunate. I had one person in my corner that was like my grounding support. His name is Chandresh. He runs a company now called Break the Norms. And he was like my one like coach that just, I knew he was going to love me unconditionally regardless of what I did. And he was like that person that was there for me. And I think you need someone like that. Like you really need to have one person that's like guiding you. And I was pulling every last resource I could to go to his workshops and classes and have him coach me. And I just knew that like having that person that believed in me so much and knew that I was going to have a different life. And the day we met, he was like, you're going to look back 4 or 5 years later and your life is going to be completely different. And he had so much trust in me that I didn't have in myself then, that it really did make all the impact for me specifically. So I remember when I met him, I was like, anything, like I need support. And I was so ready at that time.
So your advice would be seek out someone that can help you.
And that you trust and that you feel safe with. I also think, you know, looking back, the one thing I didn't have was community. I didn't have women around me that could support me and that loved me unconditionally and that, you know, had the awareness that was just, there's more to our bodies. There's more to this physical like experience, right? It's very much an illusion now that I look back. And I think when you surround yourself by people that love their bodies and love eating because food is nourishing and you're around that sort of energy, it actually impacts how you relate to food and how you relate to your body as well. So seeking out like friendships that have that sort of energy behind them as well. Yeah,
that's so important. And what do you feel like was kind of the catalyst towards you saying, okay, last time I'm not gonna, do you remember the last time that you had an episode of bulimia or a time when you said, okay, this is done?
Yeah, so that's such a good question, and I think it's a really important thing to talk about because so many people with eating disorders or disordered eating, I think they feel so much guilt and shame, like they think like this is going to be the last time and then never again, right? And then they go through this guilt and this shame because the feelings come back.
Right.
And so I can honestly say that like I've had these feelings again, I've had these experiences like I've been laxative free for almost a decade. Like I've, haven't binged in 9+ years. Like those sort of things, that experience with the food has definitely shifted. And I made a choice because I wanted to live. And I just looked back on my life and I was like, I was gifted through my spiritual belief. I was gifted this body as a gift, right? To use, to have this experience on this planet, and this is how I'm using it. Like there was almost that moment with me that I was like, this is not the way that I should be using my body. But over the last couple years where I had an experience where I bought a wedding dress, I was getting married and my wedding dress didn't fit and like all of the feelings came back and I had to like use all my tools and breathe through it. I recently had explant surgery where I took my implants out and I thought that, based on everything I teach, it wouldn't be as emotional as it was, and it was definitely a 2 to 3 month journey of really like having to dive into my own self-love and self-worth and self-esteem again and really connecting to that. And so I think although the behaviors haven't come back, our bodies are constantly changing and we can have these feelings, and it's really important to acknowledge them and trust that they're okay and it's okay to have them. And and as long as we're recognizing again that the story isn't ours, and that, you know, your truth is in your heart, it's not in your head, and you have the tools to manage them. I think that that's what moves us through, like the guilt and the shame and the relapse.
And what, because we talked about breast, you mentioned breast implants, and, you know, I haven't known that side of you. So what do you feel like kind of inspired you to get the implants in the first place?
So I had called my father, and I remember I had never called home for money, like ever. And I called home, and I was like, I would like you to put my car up for sale. And he was kind of like, oh, why? And then I was like, I just need to sell it. And he's like, are you in trouble? What's going on? And like, just sell it. And then like a few weeks later, I called him. I'm getting breast implants. And I literally, like in a decision, just made them. And the reason was because my modeling career was coming to an end, and I thought like, okay, this is a way to keep my modeling career. It was almost 10 years ago, so I was like 23, 24-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna get these implants and then transition into a different type of modeling. And then fast forward 9 years later, I've had my explant surgery almost a year ago, but for the 2 years prior to that, I became very, very ill with them. And it was this mysterious illness. We couldn't figure it out. We didn't know what was going on. And I went from doctor to doctor to doctor trying to figure out what was happening. And luckily found a doctor who was aware of breast implant illness, and also found a tribe of women, thousands of women online, talking about the impact of implants. And so then finally I had the courage to get them out. I denied it for a very long time from my own ego and from my own place of like, can't be my implants, it must be something else. But after a while I was like, is there anything more important than my health? Absolutely not.
And what made you decide to get them in the first place?
It was mostly modeling.
Okay. So you were just basically like, in order, was it transitioning from like runway
to
it was like
fitness? It was like transitioning more into catalog and lingerie and bathing suits and So it was like, I was always really fun, and then I'm like, this is just an opportunity to just transition into a different line of work and do more fit modeling, and my proportions will be, better according to according to like standards. And I look back now and I'm just like, what? Like, I'm just like, was that real life? Like, was that really happening through my mind? And so whenever any woman reaches out to me about these things where they're struggling with food, or struggling with their bodies, or struggling with just feeling good on Instagram, whatever it is, I have so much love and compassion, because I'm like, I hear you. I know what it's like to be in that hole and that spiral of just, that is what your worth is defined by.
I remember that time. I remember that time in my life when I was like, I might need to get implants to do this. And so what advice would you have that woman that's listening right now? She's like, I'm gonna need to get some implants to stack my papers. What advice would you give her?
So it's such a great question. So the first thing I always suggest to women is never ever change your body for someone else. Like, if it is about someone else, if it's about your husband, your partner, that someone won't love you, like, that's the first and foremost. Like, the one thing is like, then it's time to really do the work on where you're seeking love, right? And where you're seeking validation and your truth. And if that is your truth in this moment, I understand, because I was there. But I just think it's really, really important that the decision to change your body is your decision first and foremost. And then second, like, what is the emotion or the feeling that you're trying to seek from getting them? And if you can identify that emotion and recognize that you can get that emotion without them, you're probably seeking something that you didn't have as a child or didn't have growing up, some place in your life where you feel wounded.
Or what if they're like, I need them for money, and
for money. So that's a great question too. I would say, so if it's about money,
because that was your reason.
I would say, so that's a great question. I think it's important. I think it's important conversation to have, because if it is like, if you're an actress and you feel like you need to have them, what is the story? Why do you feel like you need to have them? I think a lot of times there's that wounding part where it's like, well, I won't be good enough unless I get the implant. But then after the implants come in, we're like, well, I'm not going to be good enough unless I get the acting coach. And then I'm like, I'm not going to be good enough if I don't change my hair color. And then they always want something different. And so I think it's identifying that you're beautiful and perfect exactly where you are, and the universe is providing you everything you need from that place. I never tell people not, like I would never say don't get implants. I think we all have our own journey of what our truths are, and we all have different lessons, but I think it is important to identify like what is the story behind them, right? And can we shift the story without getting them? And a lot of women do the work. Like there's been a lot of women reaching out to me that are like, oh, I heard your story and I've done 6 months of coaching and I'm not getting them anymore. And I'm just like, and they're like, I don't feel like they're needed anymore for the dynamics of my relationship, or the dynamics of where I am with my life.
And what was the specific health illness that you were experiencing because of them?
Yeah, so I woke up in the middle of the night with extreme heart palpitations, not knowing what was happening, feeling like I was almost having an anxiety attack. And my husband was like really confused, and he was calling his friends who were doctors who were out of the country. And then when I got home, the heart palpitations continued in the middle of the night, and I would wake up feeling like I was having these anxiety attacks, which wasn't anxiety, it was actually heart palpitations. And then I started developing pain in my arms, tingling in my hands, pain under my armpits, memory loss, brain fog, chronic exhaustion. My immune system always felt suppressed, where I couldn't fight off sickness. There were just so many things happening that it started to really scare me, because all my test results were coming back completely normal.
Right.
And I think that what happens is a lot of times we have symptoms that don't match our test results, and then the test results say, well, we're completely healthy. And then the doctor's like, well, you're healthy, go home. And you're like, no, but you're not listening, like you're not hearing me, like there's actually something else going on. And then we go to the next doctor, and the doctor tells us the same thing, and the next doctor. Right. And then until you have a doctor that says, okay, there actually is something happening here, we're going to keep testing, we're going to keep having this conversation, we're going to keep checking on you until we get to the root cause.
Right.
And the root cause might be emotional. It might be something that was stored, trauma, and there's several things that it could be outside of actually being a physical symptom. But until the doctor actually gets to the root cause and hears you, I think that happens so often, and that's what happened to me. And then I finally found a doctor who was like, you can continue to cover up the problem, or you can walk across the street and go get your implants out. And I'm like, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear.
And had there been an intuitive, I guess, push, or that before that doctor said that it might be the implant?
Yeah, because I started to have pain under my armpits, and I started to have like a moment of panic, and I actually saw a different breast doctor. And I think it was part, my doctors weren't worried about my implants, and then it was part like, well, there's all these other women who are sick, but maybe there's something else happening with them. But then as those numbers kept growing, I kept seeing it. I'm like, there's something here. Like there is definitely something happening with these implants. But the irony of it is like, you never see what you want to see. You know what I mean? Like you never want to see the truth until you're like, okay, I'm ready to hear the truth. Like hit me with it, you know? And I'm like, I don't even drink out of plastic. And yet I have plastic bags in my body. That's like the disconnect. And I realize like sometimes we can be so blinded to the truth because we're just terrified to hear it. And so that was really my story in that moment. It was just this idea that it's there, it's in front of me, and I just wasn't open and receptive and willing until I got sick enough.
And so how long did the process take? Like you mentioned after you got them out, then you went through the actual healing. So what did that look like for you? Yeah,
so I ended up explanting a year ago, and then I felt immediately better. Like within a couple of weeks, I started to get my energy back, and I was just like, wow, this weight is off my chest. I started having panic. I stopped having the panic attacks in the middle of the night. And then over the course of a year of basically detoxing, my symptoms are almost like 95% gone. So it's been a really like beautiful journey of just recognizing that we can rebuild our health if we get to the root cause of the problem, whatever it is.
Awesome. And then emotionally, like having them for that long and then releasing, like how did that feel emotionally?
Yeah, so that was one of the hardest parts. And the interesting thing about it was when I started to share about my story of getting them out, I didn't have a lot of insecurity about it. But I posted online, and then I started to get all of these women who were like, what is your husband gonna feel? And I'm like, I don't know, it's my choice, I haven't asked him. Or like, my husband would never let me get them out, or my husband got them for me for Christmas gifts, or my partner wants me to get them, or like, and so there was all of this sort of insecurities and other people's projections being put on me, which was also stirring up the insecurity in myself. And then I was like, what is my husband going to think? I haven't even sat down and asked him. And then as it got closer to the surgery, I started to actually have to process the pain of the experience. And the pain wasn't so much about actually not having them anymore. It was about the fact that I had made this choice and there was no one else to blame but myself. Like, couldn't blame the doctors. I can't, the FDA, like all these people were like suing the FDA and getting mad at the doctor. And I'm like, no, I went in, I signed off, I went into surgery. This is my responsibility, and now the only person that I have to forgive is myself. And so I did a lot of ritual and ceremony and wrote a lot of forgiveness letters and just, sat with myself for quite a bit of time. Did all the exercise, like look at yourself in front of the mirror, naked, love yourself, tell yourself this is your body, the gift that gets to like move you through this world. And so it was definitely an emotional process, and I had to really sit with myself and recognize that a lot of the insecurities and the pain that was being projected wasn't my husband's story either. And I had to really like sit with him and apologize to him and say like, I know this isn't your story, but like I need to hear it from you, or like I know this isn't your story, but this is what's coming up for me. Because I didn't know his story.
What do you need to hear from him?
Yeah, so I would sit with him and I would just be like, this isn't your story, but like I'm just worried like about our intimacy. I'm worried about how you're gonna feel. Like, what are your thoughts on this? What is your relationship to the implants? What are your relationship to my body? Like, I just want to experience your thoughts on this. And there was a lot of crying and a lot of like, I just want to know what you're feeling. And it was all coming from me. It was all my own wounding.
And so how do you feel like he handled like the entire process?
Yeah, he did an amazing job. I mean, he definitely does a lot of self-development, and he worked with his coaches, and he had a coach help him. And we always get support whenever something like this surfaces, where it's like, we might not be hearing each other, like we might just be missing each other in the experience. And so we have someone there to kind of support us through it. But
beautiful.
It was great.
And how long have you been married?
We have been married almost 2 years, November.
Nice,
yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
And I like what you said, like you got coaching, he got coaching. So is therapy something that you recommend for?
Yeah, I think for both of us, it's been this journey of, and even himself, like finding, I think codependency can happen a lot, and we're both entrepreneurs, and we both are like finding each other in our own experience of being independent entrepreneurs, and like, how do you love one another and still want what's best for the other person? And it definitely gets challenged. We're both type A, and we both like are running a million miles, and so how do we come back and want what's best, but then come back and be together, want what's best for the unit as well.
Right.
And so that work, we've worked with Annie Lala, who we love. She's a relationship coach. And Gavin Fry is another coach that we love. And so those are the two that we work with quite often.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. And what do you feel like is kind of your next phase?
Yeah. So I think my next phase is really this place of just vulnerability and just sharing all of it. Like I'm just like at that point where I'm like raw, whatever's true, whatever's like whatever I feel scared about, I'm just like ready to share it. I got an interesting I had an interesting conversation with a publisher who had said we sat down and she was like, what are you leaving out of your book? What if you don't get a chance to tell the story again? Like, what are the parts that you're scared to share?
Right.
And she's like, if you don't ever have this chance again, what are you leaving with the world? And so I went home that afternoon and I was like putting pieces back in where I was like, these are the parts of myself that I'm scared, but I also feel like are the most important parts to share with the world.
Right. And what are one of those parts that we haven't talked about?
Yeah. So one of the stories I share in my book was I flew into New Zealand. Right after the earthquake, and I started backpacking, and I was mountain biking, and I flipped my bike, and I shattered my arm, and the doctors had told me, you'll never do Pilates, you'll never do yoga again. And I remember thinking to them, like, they're not telling me the truth. And I remember holding this like story in my head, like, don't let that go in your subconscious. Like, don't allow that story to be true until it's actually true. And so I did a lot of work energetically and a lot of work around my belief system of just like, this isn't going to be true. Like, I'm going to have a different story, and this is going to be a miracle that they haven't seen. And so when I flew back to America, the doctor said the same thing. Like, there's probably not a chance. Your elbow's busted. Like, there's just not a chance that you're going to be able to like do the things that you used to do. And you know, a few years later, I was leading yoga retreats with no problem.
Right.
So yeah.
And what helped heal through the journey? Because it wasn't the doctor.
Yeah.
So what things did you do to help heal your injury?
Yeah. So acupuncture, Reiki, a lot of mind-body just connection, where I would just sit and visualize my arm getting better. And as you know, as woo-woo and as like spiritual as these things sound, I just have a strong belief that it works. I think the body knows how to heal itself most of the time, and if it doesn't, it's because that's our life path and the purpose to not, you know, be healed in a certain way. And I just kept visualizing my arm getting better, and visualizing that I would be doing yoga again, and visualizing that I could do the things that I used to be able to do. And so that was really it. Like, I just, you know, and working with a coach and working on my subconscious beliefs and so forth. That was
so it sounds like since a young age, even though you've gone through these ups and downs, that you have a pretty healthy routine. So can you share with us like day in a life? Like what does it look like when it comes to your nutrition and your spiritual practices and things like that?
So I think from like, a lot of people say like, oh, it's important to have a very set ritual every single day, or a ceremony every single day. I find it's much better for me to just meditate in the morning and ask myself, what do I need for that day? And there's different things that come up, you know, based on what it is and what I'm experiencing in that moment. And sometimes I'll need more meditation. Sometimes I'll need, you know, a lot more time for myself. Sometimes I'll need to journal for an hour. Sometimes I won't need to journal that day. It just depends on what I'm actually experiencing. So every morning I meditate for 20 minutes, and then I connect and ask, like, what are the things that will really be serving for you today and really support you throughout the day. But, you know, most days I'm eating like 90% plant-based, and I eat pretty clean. I eat a lot of smoothies and green juice and lemon water and tea throughout my day, and I take lots of different supplements and, you know, mushrooms and all the things that we always talk about. And then the one thing that has really shifted things for me as well is right after I meditate, I do a couple hours of creative writing or flow or content creation. I used to do it later in the day, and I found that like in the morning is really the time that I love to just like bang out like content and really like let things flow.
Me too.
It's like the time I'm like, it's like quiet. I actually have my team come in later now, and I just am like, this is my time to really just get into my rhythm of things. And I always do I do gratitude meditations in the morning, and then forgiveness at night. So I hold space for like whatever, you know, I did throughout the day that didn't feel like that was serving for my body or serving for my soul, and so it doesn't carry through to the next day.
That's beautiful. And last meal, last meal in life, you're like, all right, I'm checking out tomorrow. What would you eat?
I would definitely have a reishi smoothie from Erewhon, because I'm a little addicted. I actually realized I was like, I've become a little dependent on those. I need to take a break. I like recognize that addiction pattern in myself. I just anything chocolate, like big chocolate bowl of like every chocolate there was just piled in. I think I would just love chocolate. And what else would I eat? Like, do you like things like tacos? I love like
food. Like, do you even eat?
Yes.
What do you eat, please?
I'm like just thinking of like, I'm like, I eat Erewhon every day, but I don't want to like plug them away on your podcast.
You don't have to plug them, just plug the food.
Okay, what would I have? I definitely like, I make this like blueberry kale, and then I take like sweet potato chips and I like crunch them up and mix it with olive oil. It's like my favorite salad on the planet.
I love it.
Also sweet potatoes, I'm obsessed with.
I love sweet potatoes.
Everything sweet potato. I like eat anything sweet potato. I literally bag the sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes. What else?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's so much I think that is coming up right now and with women and our body issues.
Yeah.
And so let's say we have a woman who they want to come train with you and things like that, and they're having, eating disorder. They're like, hey, look, I got fake lashes, got fake hair, got fake boobs, I got fake booty. Like, how can you help me? Like, I don't, I couldn't imagine not having any of this. But I don't love myself. Like, I hate that. I feel like I have to do this to be.
Yeah,
what do I do?
To exist and have it be part of your identity, and to shape the reality of finding the external right outside of ourselves. And so and it's interesting that you mentioned a lot of things, because I do see that so often where it's like, okay, well, I got the lashes and I still don't feel good. Okay, I got the hair and I still don't feel good. Got the boobs, still don't feel good. And there's nothing, I'm not shaming on any of that, but it's like, if we continue to do those things and yet we're still not feeling good in our body, then kind of what's the point too, right? And so there was a really famous plastic surgeon, I'm blanking on his name, but he was saying, and he turned to his self-help writer, and he was sharing like only 1% of his patients actually got the self-esteem that they were hoping to get from the surgery. And so I think it's really important to recognize, like, what is the story that you're holding on to around the lack of self-worth, being unlovable, being undesirable? Like, what is that story first and foremost? Like, what is that operating from? And then I think it's really important to start to connect to, like, what are the things that are going to light you up and bring you joy and give you purpose? Because I just have such a strong belief that when we have a stronger calling, desire, purpose, mission in our lives, like why we're here, we're gonna actually want to take care of our body because we want to be alive. Right? Like, it's not even going to be a challenge anymore. It's like, of course I'm going to choose healthy food because that's what's serving my body to the highest vibrational experience that's going to keep me going every day and being able to fill out this mission. And so a lot of times it's not about looking at the food and the movement. It's about looking at like the relationships and the connections, and looking at like, what is your why? What is your purpose to be here? What is the higher vision? Because then it's like, where are you putting your energy? And if you're conserving all this energy worrying about food and working out and the extra inch on your hips and the extra 5 pounds, and you're actually moving that energy into something outside of yourself, right? Something that creates impact, you free up all this energy to do that. And so I think it's really important to make that transition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you could have any occupation and be successful at it, what would it be?
Yeah. So I would be doing what I...
No, other than I'm
doing. So I love interior design. I originally went to school for it. And so I just love being creative. I love creating space that makes you come alive and feel really, happy to be in it, and just like uplifts your energy. And so I think that would be like my second choice, or creating like a media company around content creation would be something else that I would love to do.
You can work on my place here.
Yeah, it's funny, right? We have like all, like, as entrepreneurs, I think it's always like, there's all these, I'm like, if I had a second life, I would do this, and I would, I would own a charity, and I'm always like thinking of, if I had more time, what would all the other things be?
And what advice would you give your 14-year-old self?
My 14-year-old self, I would... So this is an interesting question, because I think if I had gone through 10 years of pain, I wouldn't have the compassion and just the ability to hold space and show up for my clients in the way that I do. And so I think if I would have given her courage then to leave the modeling industry, she wouldn't have what she has now. And so I think I would have just told her the same thing, which is just trust your path. You know, trust that someday you're going to be doing the work that you're here to do. Trust that you're going to, you know, be a Hay House author and, you know, get to work with women all over the world and hold beautiful masterminds with other amazing entrepreneurs, and like just trust in that. And when you get there, it will be perfect. I think that's what I would have told her.
Thank you. And last question that I ask everyone: how do you get loved up?
How do I get loved up? So for me, I think the most important part of my experience that really just fuels my self-love is meditation. And I think that the reason for that is I have this belief that like the self-love in you, the amount of love in you doesn't fluctuate. Like it actually is always there. It's just our experience or the illusion around us that makes it fluctuate. And so when I really need to feel that love, I just go into myself and connect with my own intuition, and I connect to the space in between my thoughts where I'm like, this is my heart. Like the thoughts are just stories that aren't mine, but like the actual space in between is like where the love exists. And for me, that has been, it's an Eckhart Tolle, you know, practice, but for me, it's been the most powerful space to really like feel the love that embodies all of us.
That's beautiful. And where can people find you? What do you
at SaraAnneStewart.com or Sara Anne Stewart on Instagram, and DM me if you have any questions about breast implant illness, body eating disorders, anything like that. I'm here to support, so just let me know, and happy to get back to anyone.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And
thank you so much.
Throw a little heart, throw a little love at the audience. Until next time, get loved up.